I just like making sure it looks good. Okay, I have to wait till an hour. All right, giving it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
And then I'll stay for check-in, of course.
Great, great. How are you?
I'm good. I was on a special project, so I haven't been around. I missed you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good to see you.
Life been good for you?
Yeah. It's been really good.
Good.
I've been busy creating a lot of new classes. So
Oh, fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a new one, isn't it?
yeah, this will be the second time I've taught
Okay.
it. And then I have a brand new one after this. So
Oh, what's that? What's
I'm
that
doing
about?
that one is on nature photography.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, specifically landscapes, but I'm doing a series of those.
That's an interesting. I always feel like the only time I really take a lot of pictures, I went to Norway and took a whole lot of landscapes, of course.
Yeah.
That are all very boring, but it's mostly I use it just for me to relive what it looked like.
Yeah, that's someplace I really want to visit.
Oh, it was amazing. I did 3 weeks there and did a 12-day cruise up the West Coast.
Yeah.
But it was in January, which is why it was very cheap. So we got stuck trying to cross one piece of open sea. And I was on a small ship that did more stops, which I loved. That's why I chose it. But we couldn't cross it. And it was very, very scary. Most people were sick as a dog. I learned that for me, fear is a great cure for seasickness, because I was so terrified that I never got sick. It was so scary. Right? It was so and I knew we were okay, the cruise all walking around okay, but I was terrified as a non-shipping person. But I'll have to tell you sometime. It was an amazing adventure.
Yeah, I definitely want to see that. Only place in Scandinavia I've been to is Iceland, but
now that would be cool.
And that was spectacular.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Leslie.
Hello, Scott. How are you today?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Good, good.
Good.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, who is that?
This is Carter.
Carter. Okay. Hi, Carter. It just says iPhone, so I didn't know who that was.
Yeah, I've never used this before to do a class. I've always used my laptop. And I need to apologize in advance. I thought I was going to be able to be still instead of the desk and do this class. I'm going to have to be mobile, though.
Okay.
So just to let you know.
No problem. No problem at all.
You wouldn't have a quick tip on how I could show my face briefly, would you?
So if you are on an iPhone, I think you want to go up to the top of your Zoom screen. And they're probably that whole tab where they have the chat and the stop video and all that, or start video, all that would be there.
Hey there, good afternoon. How are you?
Hi, Carol Sue. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. How's the grandbaby? How's the little baby that you all take pictures of?
Oh, he's good. He's good. He's starting to say a few words.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, he said apple and yeah, he's
He'll
doing well.
Into everything.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
you know what, Scott? I'm basically glad I was the one who took it and suggested this type of class, you know.
Yes, I remember that. Yes, I think I owe you a creator's fee or something.
Well, the thing is well, we'll discuss it further down the line. All right.
That sounds good. So Carter, you were able to figure that out, looks like.
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, you're on mute. Well,
So we get one or the other, I guess.
yeah, yeah.
Picture or voice.
Or voice, yeah. Okay. All right, and one more person coming in, and we should be probably good to go. I think most everybody is a Get Set Up alum, or not alum, but veteran. So good to see everybody. I am going to go ahead and get us started. I just want to tell you a little bit about this class. It's this is the second time I've taught it. Carol Sue sort of put the bug in my ear about it, so I have to give her credit a while back. But this is really focused on, it's not really a creative writing class in any way. It's really focused on just practical day-to-day writing. There is a creative writing class we have too, but this one is designed just to really help you communicate on a day-to-day basis with emails or any kind of report you want to write, or even if you're starting the blog or something like that. So hopefully it will be really helpful for you. Okay, and I'll get that off my screen and get us rolling. Okay. Okay, so I think a lot of you have been in my previous classes, so this may be redundant, but I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, and that is a suburb of Washington, D.C. I have a degree in journalism. I've been a writer throughout my professional career. And in the past, I've worked as a newspaper reporter, a news director, an editor, and a blog creator. And I really enjoy being here on Get Set Up. I love seeing familiar faces. I love the community building mission we have and the interactive learning. I end up learning something from one of the people on each call. Usually somebody has a good tip that is handy for me, and I can incorporate it into the next class too. So it's just a great platform. And Get Set Up. It's great if we can all see each other on screen, if you're not too shy about that. We're here to not only help you build useful skills, but also to make social connections. If you would like to request a recording of this class, we are recording it. You can get that by emailing us at help@getsetup.io. If you are joining us by live stream, welcome. Glad to have you watching. I encourage you to register for a class. That's a great way to participate, ask questions right during the class, and get to connect with other people as well. And I don't think this is going to apply too much to this class, but Get Set Up is not paid to promote any specific products. So if I happen to talk about any kind of product during the class, it's not meant to be an endorsement. Okay, so what I want to kind of walk through today, even before I get into that, just kind of curious what interested people in getting some writing tips. Just if anybody wants to maybe share, I'd be real interested to hear. Anything you're struggling with or that you were hoping to learn in the class, or?
I'll speak briefly.
Yeah.
I'm getting to the age where sharing with people and sharing what I've lived and possibly helping other people, is on my mind a lot. And I just like to learn to do it the most effective way.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Carter. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like Carter. I'm trying to. Oops. I'm trying to, start to write my life story, and I want to make it so that it comes out, understandable, but yet, a lot of good memories and all. So.
Great. Okay. Anybody else want to share?
Yes, and I'm interested in blogging.
Blogging. Okay. Okay. That is great. A lot of people are doing that now. So,
And podcasting. So they go hand in hand.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'll get us started just to make sure that we don't have any background noise that pops up unexpectedly. I'm going to put everybody on mute for the time being, but please don't consider yourselves muted. At some point, I'll stop for discussion and questions and things like that throughout the hour. Just want to make sure while I'm talking, you don't get disrupted from hearing me. So. Okay, so what I want to walk through today is just some ways to structure sentences and paragraphs really effectively and to create some compelling prose with strong verbs and metaphors. And also we'll talk a little bit about editing yourself effectively, which is something I always need help with, but just ways to kind of catch yourself with typos and things like that. Okay, so one of the first things that I think helps with any kind of writing ambition is to just read. Think about what you like to read and also just things you don't mind reading, whether that's a newspaper or a good novel or a nonfiction book or something like that. But think about what specifically are you noticing about that makes you really like it? Or what might you dislike about it? And think about also too, what do you hate reading? And why do you hate reading that? Is it because it's too dense? It's too technical? It's just not very engaging in the way it's written? That kind of gets your mind thinking about how you want to write. And I am going to tell you a formula that I have always used, and that is to economize when I write. And that means not necessarily using fewer words every time, but using them in a more direct and precise way. You know, I don't even like to use words like economize all that much. Sometimes a shorter word like trim might be as appropriate, and that's much pithier. So there are some words that we tend to want to use all the time. And we do that, I know, when we talk, but when we're speaking or when we're writing, some of these just kind of get in the way, and they're usually not necessary. They could be substituted. These adverbs could be substituted with just a really strong descriptive verb. So words like very, highly, quite, extremely, basically, or essentially, I think I try to avoid using those. And sometimes I let essentially get in there and I try to catch up, but sometimes I find myself doing it. But here's an example of why, of how you could avoid that, how you can get around those and actually make your writing a little stronger. Here's an example. I'm quite pleased with the very fine work you've done. Say you're telling somebody that, you're writing to them and telling them this. You could just say, I'm delighted with your work. Or you could just really snap it up and just say very directly, I love your work. That, to me, is much more profound than I'm quite pleased with. And the quite is the one that definitely doesn't need to be there. So that's just an example of getting your mind thinking about ways to sort of trim your sentences to say what you're wanting to get across in a much more profound way. And here's another one. Here's one that's a little too close to home right now. This virus is extremely transmissible. How about just saying something like this? Virus spreads unsparingly. Here I do have an adverb, but I don't think you have to avoid adverbs altogether. I just think there are certain kinds that are kind of what we tend to want to fall back on and don't really add that much to what you're trying to say. And then we've got a lot of these qualifiers and colloquialisms that we throw into conversation all the time, and they also sneak into writing. And things like being that, in my humble opinion, needless to say, having said that, for what it's worth at this point in time, the thing is, and those are, they're going to bog down sentences and they don't need to be there. So others that I kind of stop and think about before I write them is, it goes without saying. Okay, then why say it? Not to mention, then why mention it? And obviously, okay, if it's that obvious, why say it? So you can ask yourself those questions sometimes when you're crafting a sentence or paragraph, and you start to see those words popping up. Here's another one. As far as I'm concerned, we can wait until next year to sell the store. We can sell the store next year. Or the thing about smartphones is you usually need to upgrade every couple of years or so. Okay, that could be tightened up to just say smartphone users usually upgrade every 2 years. And then we have all these cliches and well-worn phrases. You know, this is fine when we're conversing, right? When we're just having a conversation with friends or family members, we throw these terms out all the time. They don't need to be in your writing. If you really want your writing to be original, these are sayings that you just want to kind of sidestep. Things like at the end of the day, fit the bill, chomping at the bit, burn bridges, throw the baby out with the bath water, have the bandwidth, things like that. You also got to think sometimes people have no idea what those mean. I remember when I was a teenager and I heard somebody use the word throw the baby out with the bath water for the first time. Well, I was horrified by the analogy or the metaphor, but I also had no idea what they were talking about. I just had never heard that before. Have the bandwidth, you know, that's a relatively new one. That's emerged in the digital age, where we're thinking about bandwidth coming into our home internet connection, things like that. But somebody might not know that. So I just kind of tiptoe around those, using those words. And there are lots of concise words that we can use instead of ones we may be tempted to use. Say like utilize. You saw what I did earlier with economize. I just found an alternative that was a little shorter. Instead of utilize, you could say use. Instead of in close proximity, you could say near. Instead of facilitate, say help. And instead of finalize, just say complete or finish. Much clearer and much more direct and kind of more concise. And you also want to watch redundancy. There are a lot of things we say without realizing how redundant we're being. And I'll show you a few of them here. Circle around. Well, you don't need the around. When you're circling, you're going around something. Okay, so that can go. The around can go. Added bonus. Well, a bonus is an addition to something, right? So that can go. Write down. Well, do we ever write up? During the course of, that can be, that the course of can just be taken out of there. And global pandemic, this is one we hear a lot right now. A pandemic is inherently global. So we do not need to say global pandemic. And one other thing you're going to want to do is try to use active voice as much as you can. Now, I'm saying a lot of these things here, and when you're writing fiction or something like that, it's going to be a little different. The rules don't get really somewhat loose because you're using a lot of artistic license. But for everyday communication and writing nonfiction, for that matter, including memoirs and things like that, I really think that trying to use active voice is really important. So here's an example. This chair was given to me by my favorite aunt. That could just be tightened to my favorite aunt gave me this chair. So that's just an example of how sometimes we get far wordier than we need to be. Or keeping the doors locked at night is something my wife and I always make sure to do before going to bed. It's much easier to write, my wife and I lock the doors before going to bed. So I don't know if you can tell, but I'm sort of budgeting my prose here, so to speak. And here's another one that we hear all the time, and this has got to be one of the most evasive phrases I have ever heard. I think you've heard politicians say this, in fact, sometimes. Mistakes were made. Okay, well, somebody needs to take responsibility. If you're going to write this, I would avoid writing it altogether. You'd rather say something like, we made mistakes, or I made a mistake, or they made a mistake. But, say who made the mistake. Or you could just say, we erred, and leave it at that. And before I get into this next part, I think I'm going to stop. I didn't want to go through this whole thing without getting some feedback, hearing what you're thinking. This is subjective too. I will be the first to say so. So there may be something I've said so far that you've really disagreed with too, and that's okay. These are just some tricks I've learned over time, and so I wondered if anybody had questions or comments or anything like that. Feel free to unmute yourself if you do.
This would have been like when we were younger, having to do essays for school, and you only had like 500 words to do, or something. And so I could see where it would be very helpful to have had a course like that, to be able to hone down on the words so it's not so wordy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or there, you know what, Leslie, there's always that other problem from back in school. I remember this, especially in college, where you had to write something like a 5,000 word essay. That's when I tried to find all kinds of ways to stretch it out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. So in fact, I think that's where I got into some bad habits. So once I got out into the real world, was working at newspapers, and back in the day where you really learned this stuff was when you had everything in print and you only had so much space that you could get your story written in. So yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
So your friend was word count in college, right? But on the computer program?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm old enough that we didn't have that back then.
Oh, you had to type the papers like I did. All right.
I did. Yes. Yeah. In fact, I think I even had a manual typewriter. I didn't even have an electric one. So
I had an Underwood.
Oh, yeah. So here's another thing to think about is just kind of jacking up your verbs a little bit. And when I say jacking up your verbs, I mean, this is where sometimes I have a little, I go to the synonym finder online sometimes, or I have a thesaurus next to me or something. Sometimes I want to find a really strong way of getting a point across. So say you've got Grace went as fast as she could up the stairs. Okay, that's a fine sentence, no big problem there. But what if I just said Grace bolted up the stairs? Just a little more poetic. Bolted is probably not the most original word that I could use there, but it's stronger and it actually provokes more of an image in my head about Grace going up the stairs. Or we sat out by the pool and drank margaritas. Okay, well, good for you. Maybe say we lounged by the pool and slurped margaritas. Just kind of makes it a little more interesting of a read. Here's one. I ran to the hardware store to pick up a new wrench so I could fix the broken pipe. How about I scurried to the hardware store and bought a wrench to fix the pipe rather than ran? Just kind of come up with something a little more original there. And here's something that I learned a long time ago when I was in a writing group with a bunch of people, and we were getting together to write short stories and share them and critique them. And somebody said something to me that was one of the most valuable lessons I've ever received from anybody about my writing. And that was that I use the forms of to be just ad nauseum. I was just using those all the time, and that my writing would be so much better if I found a way to get around that. And that's sometimes where strong verbs can come in to play and really benefit you. But here is an example of how it's easy to start letting those slip in when you could tighten it up a little bit. Lisa is always picking the fries off of Priscilla's plate. Okay, why don't we just say Lisa always picks fries off Priscilla's plate? Or Eric was 7 feet tall and was the tallest member of the team. A couple of wases in there. How about Eric, the tallest member of the team, stood 7 feet? We don't even have to say 7 feet tall. If we're saying he's the tallest member of the team, we kind of get that he's tall. 7 feet will also get that across. The pizza at Mario's is simply the best in town. And there's another one of those words, simply, that we don't need. How about Mario's serves the best pizza in town? Just leave it at that. And it isn't wise for you to stay out past midnight. Here's another one where you kind of have a negative to start off the sentence when, I don't have this in the class, but a lot of times I try to find ways to avoid using words like not, never, and things like that, and turning it around in a way like, I haven't done that here yet, but I'm getting there. You shouldn't stay out past midnight. So really what I'm trying to say here is you should come home before midnight. Or if you are in a position of authority, maybe looking over a teenager or something like that, you can simply say, come home before midnight and leave it at that. And something else I try to avoid is beginning a sentence with the word there. So something like this: there are 5 people in my office who are always late to meetings. That could be tightened to just 5 people in my office arrive late to every meeting. So it's a little bit tighter and still gets the point across. So another thing you want to think about is, I'm talking a lot about economizing, keeping sentences tight, but at the same time, you don't want to do that at the expense of missing out on enriching your message with details and specifics, because that can really create a lot more of an understanding from your readers. And it can also even boost your credibility at times, depending on what you're writing about. So here are a couple examples of that. So we had a home cooked meal at Bert's. Okay, that's fine. Good for you. How about Bert served us meatloaf, fresh green beans, and mashed potatoes with gravy. Okay, now I've got a great image of what you had at Bert's, what you got to eat. Might even make me a little hungry. Or we can provide you with great service. How many times have we heard that when we've taken our car to the mechanics, or maybe had a salesperson come to our door selling vacuum cleaners or something like that? I don't know. But anyway, we can provide you with great service. That tells me nothing, because great is a subjective term. That's all in the eye of the beholder. So when they tell me they're going to provide me with great service, I want to know, okay, what does that great service mean? What does it entail? So here we go. Our service includes an oil change, tire rotation, and safety check. So I don't need to have a word like great there. I just want to know what you're going to do with my car when I bring it in. That's an example of where your credibility gets boosted, when you can provide that kind of detail. And you can do it in a pretty tight way, but it really gives me, in a case like this, would give me a lot more faith in what I'm going to get for my money. So I've heard this said, and when you're writing fiction, I think this is a different matter. Sentences can flourish. They can go longer or shorter, but I tend to like to keep my sentences fairly tight when I'm writing. And rule of thumb that I've heard is try to keep the length of your sentences to 15 to 20 words. This isn't something where you need to, every time you write a sentence, you need to count the words to make sure you haven't exceeded that. They can exceed that a little bit. I think 15 to 20 is a ballpark. But it helps to keep you writing in a really direct format, and also helps keep your paragraphs a little shorter. And that's another thing you want to kind of strive for, is to keep paragraphs relatively short. And here's an example. These treatments are very often expensive. These treatments are very often expensive and technically difficult, and their effectiveness very much depends on the overall health status of the patient in question. Okay, maybe we could just turn this around and say the treatments can be expensive and difficult to provide. Their effectiveness depends on the patient's general health. Little tighter. And here's another one. Although there is a clear walk signal for bikers and pedestrians, and they're not supposed to cross the intersection until the walk sign is on. If a motorist is coming around a curve and sees a person or a biker approaching the ramp, instinct may kick in, causing the motorist to swerve, stop, or react negatively to avoid the possibility of hitting him, which unfortunately may cause another collision altogether. That is one sentence, folks. I had to take a couple of breaths within the middle of one sentence. So how could we tighten that up? How could we sort of give it a little barbershop treatment there? How about this? Pedestrians and bicyclists are prohibited from crossing the intersection until the walk sign is on. But, and I had, last week when I taught this, some people were really curious about starting a sentence with a conjunction, and that is perfectly fine. I do that all the time, never had it edited out. I like it better than however. So you can use and or but to start off a sentence. So don't be afraid to do that. And so here I just wrote it, but a driver coming around the corner might see someone approaching the ramp, instinctively swerve or stop to avoid hitting the person and crash. So let me give you this one. This is, it's a little bit of a composite, but it's a somewhat true to life. It is an email that I was CC'd on a while back. After the discussion at our January 12th meeting, I decided to create a link to the shared document, which will help us to be able to directly access the team listing when one of us on the team needs to update our contact information. I think this is the most efficient way to keep our information up to date. This way I can just go to the link when it's time for me to check on updates to the data. Okay, what? I'm like trying to follow that, and I'm not really following what this person, I kind of do, but it's just sort of like, am I missing something here? So after clarification, this is what she really was trying to say. That's it. So there's no reason to go into all that. That kind of detail is kind of needless. That is where you're just trying to get people to do something. You just tell them exactly how to do it and leave it at that. And here's another one that I also was CC'd on. The discomfort I have is that Doug is posting the list of members of the club to our webpage when I and others did not realize that he was doing so. Yes, it is true that the website is private, but we don't tell anyone in the club that the information will be posted. And I do believe we have an obligation to let the members know that their information is being placed online. That disclosure should be made by Doug himself, not by me. Okay, let's take a buzzsaw to this and just say, I'm concerned that Doug posted our members' names to our website without telling us. He should inform everyone. So again, right to the point, when you're communicating on a day-to-day basis with people, especially in emails, actually something like this, you may not think of it when you're writing it, but you're actually wasting people's time. And that's not lost on them. People start to really get irritated when they get long drawn out explanations and sentences like this for something that can be easily said in a sentence or two. So this will make you, it might make you more popular, who knows, but it at least will be appreciated, I think, a little bit more by people on the receiving end. Okay, and one other way to keep things tight is to think about using bullet points, especially when you're conveying a lot of information about, well, just a lot of information, sometimes technical or sometimes detailed. Paring things down into bullets makes it a lot more digestible for the reader. It's actually sometimes easier to write it that way too. So here's an example of something about flood conditions contributing to the growth of many kinds of fungi, some of which can cause illness. Cleanup workers are at increased risk of exposure to airborne fungi, yada, 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 yada. Okay. Talking about decaying vegetable matter, moldy building materials, rotting waste, and so forth. So how about we tighten that up with some bullets and we just say, be careful when cleaning up after a flood. You may breathe in unhealthy mold in the air, damp building materials, the list goes on. But it's a 5-point list. You probably don't want to have a 10-point or 10 bullet points or 15 or anything like that. But if you can pare it down to 5, 6, you're in good shape. And look at this, how lengthy this was, and whoops, and here it's not taking much more space. It's probably taking a little bit of less space, and it's much clearer. Okay. Okay, I'll stop there again for a sec and see if anybody has a question or observation or anything like that.
What do you call it? If something is too long, I don't even read it. I read 2 sentences and that is it. And I'm the same way with taking basically books. I mean, don't kill me with your words, you know? I don't want to be murdered by words.
I'm going to have to remember that saying, don't be murdered by words, Carol. I like that.
I agree with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can be a long, painful death.
Yeah, it can. And I know I've tried to force myself sometimes to read books that I think have important information in them, but are written really poorly. And the older I've gotten, the more I've thought, no, life's too short. There are too many good books out there. So,
but I think that you were too kind as far as forcing yourself to take and read it. Thing is sometimes I just want to throw it in the fireplace for kindling. Because the other thing too that drives me crazy is the see Jane run Jane run. So I ain't got no time for that either.
Yeah.
Well, I hope there's nobody here in law enforcement because I might be guilty. Last time I heard, penalty for murder was pretty steep. So I'll just have to go forward and try to be wise.
Yeah. That may be a first if somebody gets convicted of murder by words, murder by writing. Yeah.
That would be a great poem.
Murder by writing. Yeah.
Sometimes you lose your train of thought when you're reading all those words. So
Yeah.
when you make it more concise, it's easier to read it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so here is another thing to think about. If you've got a specialized kind of knowledge, that's a really great place to be, and you're an authority, right? But there is also a way of communicating that authority that will actually get your message out much better than if you are really sort of too immersed in your expertise. So that's one thing to think about is know your audience. Are you writing for experts or a niche audience or a lay audience? Because that does come into play. And even when you're writing for experts, like say for your peers, they still like to read writing that is pleasant to read. So even then, some of these things we've just gone over might be well to apply. But you could still get away with some of the technical lingo, the jargon of the industry, whatever. And in a niche audience, say you're writing to people who have a certain hobby, there may be terms they know that the general public might not, but can probably be fine with using some of those terms. If it's a lay audience, you really have to stop and think, will a large number of people understand that? Or will I just miss quite a few people because they have no idea what I'm talking about? And that brings in something called what psychologists call the curse of knowledge. And that's something that sneaks up on us and we don't realize it a lot of times. And I have had it happen in teaching classes here on Get Set Up even, where I have used a term or a word and people don't know what I mean. And it's because it's something that I've done for a long time, so I know it. And I start to forget, it just sort of escapes my mind that a large number of people may still not have any idea what that term means. So always remember, you may know the topic, but your readers may not. And you might want to look in your copy before you distribute it for words or acronyms or abbreviations or terms that you had to learn. And it may be a long time ago that you had to learn them, but it's one thing to kind of think about. And just watch the jargon or lingo in the world where you frolic, so to speak. So I'm going to show you where the curse of knowledge kind of snuck into my own copy. I've been a science writer and wrote a lot in my last job, as a matter of fact, about neuroscience and brain science. And so here is a paragraph that probably about 60 to 70% of my audience probably would follow, but there were probably another, and this was a professional audience, but there were probably people who did not. A study revealed what happens in our brain when we use a GPS device or application to get to a destination. fMRI measures showed relatively decreased activity in the, okay, and here I get to a word that I read, and in my research, I have no idea how to pronounce this. Anorhinal, I don't know. And posterior hippocampus, when participants use GPS, like blah, blah, blah. Okay, wow, right? Now, maybe some people will enjoy reading that. It's not my best work by any means. I could just simply say it like this. When we depend on GPS to reach a destination, and admittedly, some people may not know what GPS means. So, yeah, maybe I could have changed that to computerized navigation or something like that. But when we depend on GPS to reach a destination, activity decreases in the brain regions associated with navigation. So that's essentially what I was trying to get across. Still a little technical, but a lot easier to digest. And one way to deal with when you do have to communicate some complex information is to use metaphors and analogies. They, rather than dumbing down the information you're trying to get across, you are showing your command of the subject. And it's making your writing a lot more engaging. So how do you come up with metaphors and analogies? If there's something that you're trying to get across and you can't figure out how to sort of break it down into something that would invoke some imagery, you could choose a character or an object or a setting to illustrate your point. So just start sort of daydreaming about what that might be. You could read examples of metaphors and analogies and just get a good feel for how people craft them. And the other thing I've heard people talk about, I've heard a couple of writers use this, is to just sit down and list nouns randomly, whatever comes to your mind, and then free associate with your topic. So, that might be, what does a bagel have to do with my article on brain science? That's just off the top of my head, but that's the kind of thing we're talking about. That's just sort of a creative tool you can try to get some ideas flowing. So here are some examples of metaphors and analogies, and some of these are just evoking senses in people. I feel the stench of failure. That's a little bit of a mixed metaphor. He reeks of infidelity. Warmth blanketed the area. Time is a scoundrel. The sun caressed my face. New love is likely perfectly ripened fruit. Is like perfectly ripened fruit. That one was mine. I was just trying to come up with one. I know it's kind of nauseating, but you get the idea. And this one, in hindsight, I see it now, and I probably should have just written, I smell failure, or I smell the stench of failure, or something like that. And here are some other examples. This one is a kind of based on a real life thing. I worked for a company once where this was an issue. You should decide whether your startup will use either Macs or PCs, but not both. Macs and PCs don't play nicely together. Now, if I am at a company and they're trying to make Macs and PCs both work on the company network or something like that, and I'm, say, the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, and I want to get this information to the higher ups to tell them, you know, this is not going to work. I could go into all kinds of technical language, right, about why you can't get PCs and Macs to operate together in a single network or something like that. But by breaking it down to something akin to two kids who are getting in fights on the playground, it makes a lot more sense to people. And all it does is tell them this is not going to be very workable. And that's all they probably really need to know. And if they want to know more, they can ask you and you can explain then. But otherwise, that's all I need to know, is that they don't play well together. A job interview is a high stakes sport. You need a playbook. And here's one: like a chef asks his staff to taste his dishes before serving, you need to ask friends to read your content to see if it lacks flavor. So I'm going to show another example of something I wrote that this was in the second or third paragraph of the story. This was a magazine piece. And this again is pretty dense. Over the last decade, scientists have investigated how protracted psychological stress lowers telomerase activity, leading to shorter telomeres. As telomeres become shorter, cells age and die, a fate known as senescence. Studies have tied shorter telomeres to a wide range of aging-related diseases. Okay, so that is kind of technical. Some people may know what telomeres are, others do not. But this is how I rewrote and led into all this information. And this is really what it really drove home the point I was trying to get to. Think of your body like an automobile. Both require regular maintenance, periodic repairs, and safe handling. Both inevitably wear down, and much earlier when they're subject to excessive strain and lax care. And like a rusted undercarriage or a dying battery, the physical signs of decay are often unseen, lurking at a microscopic level. And from there, I'm able to just go into the gist of the story, which is about how our cells can prematurely age. And that is because of chronic stress. Okay. And then lastly, let's talk just a little bit about editing yourself, because sometimes that can be really embarrassing if that's a step that's overlooked. And I can tell you that from experience. I've embarrassed myself plenty of times. But one thing you want to do is, maybe, if nothing else, read your writing out loud to yourself after you're done. That'll help you spot missing words and run on sentences. Something happens in our brain when we're reading what we've written, and if there's a missing word or something like that, we know what we're trying to say, and we kind of subconsciously fill in the blanks without noticing that word isn't there. You can have a friend or family member read it. You can read each paragraph backwards to help spot typos, meaning you start with the last sentence and then the penultimate sentence and then the sentence before that, the sentence before that. And just do it that way. You're not really reading for context as much. And that allows you to really concentrate on just what words are in there, and might make it easier to spot misspellings, things like that. And then lastly, there is a tool that you may have heard of. It's called Grammarly. You can go to grammarly.com and sign up for it. They do have a premium version, but it is free. And you can use that to get your writing scored against your goals for whatever it is you're trying to accomplish with your writing. So what happens there is that you finish the draft of whatever you're writing, drop it into Grammarly, and it will ask you a few questions about, is this, are you aiming this for a professional audience? Are you trying to come across as formal or more casual? Few other things that it will measure it on, and then it scores it for you. And if you've got, say, a 97 on that score, then you're doing pretty well and not much to worry about. If you're scoring like a 60, maybe, you might want to go back and rework some things to try to get a higher score, because that's going to help you better get across what you're trying to get across to the audience you're trying to reach. Okay. So before I go into just a summary, I thought I'd see if there are any more questions that aroused, or any other thoughts, or.
I sort of missed the point about the nouns, and then just started listing nouns to help you come up with it.
Sure. So if I'm trying to come up with a good metaphor or an analogy, right, and I just can't think of one, I'll just start listing random nouns. I haven't really done this, but I've heard people try this. So you just sit down, stream of consciousness, start writing duck, bagel, cell phone, lamppost, just whatever comes across off the top of your head. And then you start free associating with the topic you're writing about. So if you're writing about, say, law enforcement, something within law enforcement, you're looking at all these verbs and you're thinking, what does a duck have to do with this law enforcement topic I'm talking about? And that sort of gets the ball rolling and thinking up an analogy of some sort, or a metaphor. So it's just sort of a creative tool that you can put into play if you're really struggling to come up with some kind of metaphor for your point.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
It reminds me of brainstorming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I suppose that helps with writer's block too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and writer's block can be torture. I've run into it a few times.
Sometimes it is because you're trying too hard.
Yeah.
And you got that deadline.
Yeah. And you do have to walk away, because sometimes it can last for a long time. I don't know if you're familiar with this writer, Fran Leibowitz, who was really big. I think she wrote for like The Village Voice, and she wrote several books, and she's sort of a humor writer, but she got into some writer's block that has lasted like 30 years. And so she doesn't call it a writer's block, she calls it a writer's blockade. So that's what, yeah, that's what you can run into. Yeah. Okay, well, it looks like we're down to almost the end of the hour. So I'm just going to run across this summary real quickly. Know your audience. Remember to watch those needless adverbs and colloquialisms and cliches. Use concise words rather than longer synonyms. Try to remember to avoid redundancy. Use active voice rather than passive voice. Use verbs creatively. Keep your sentences tight when you can. Use metaphors and analogies to explain, and just remember to edit yourself. So thanks. I got a little typo here I need to fix, but thank you for being here. Obviously, I didn't edit myself real well, right? I'm hoping that this was helpful for you. And if you'd like to share your experience or thoughts about the class with your friends on your social media, feeds. You can mention Get Set Up there with our hashtag Get Set Up. Or if you end up writing something and are really excited about it, another typo I have here. This is liz@getsetup.io, not .ioi, but you can drop Liz a line. She's always looking to interview some of our learners for stories she writes for our blog or our social media posts. Just some related classes coming up. We have one on journaling about nature. If you wanted to get some creative juices flowing with writing. How to build a great LinkedIn profile. That involves some solid writing there. And then we do have a creative writing class if you are interested in pursuing that a little more. My next classes, I have one coming up in about an hour, and it is on nature photography. I do teach a lot of photography classes on Get Set Up. And this one focuses specifically on landscapes. But I have a follow-up one next week on flower photography and close-ups, and then we'll have one on wildlife as well. And then tomorrow I've got a class on having some fun with your pictures with some free Photoshop apps that you can download to a mobile device and use. So that one will be a lot of fun. It just shows you all kinds of crazy things you can create. So you'll be getting the class notes, you'll get the takeaways, which will be right here, some other class suggestions, a chance to view the schedule. And when you open that up, it will take you here. And if you sign up for another class, you always have the option of sharing that with somebody else. Now on our new website setup, you can go to click here after you've registered for a class. You can share it on Facebook, on WhatsApp, or via email. Just send it out to anybody whose email address you have and let them know, hey, why don't you join me for this class? So this be a way to get your friends involved. And on the feedback form, which you'll have a link to, it defaults to 4 stars, but it's a 5-star rating system. So you can lower that or add to that as you wish. And any comments you have about the class, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it would be really helpful to us, especially since this is a pretty new class. And lastly, if you've got ideas for other things that you'd like to learn and you don't see it yet on our schedule of classes, let us know about it, because we are looking for great ideas about things that you want to learn about. So this is for you, our learners, and we want to make sure we're giving you a lot to learn. Lastly, if you can just spread the word about Get Set Up, that would be really helpful to us. We are trying to expand our reach and help as many people as we can. If you'd like to host an interest group on Get Set Up, you can do that by just dropping us an email at help@getsetup.io. We do have interest groups on all kinds of things, hobbies, topics of interest. And lastly, don't forget that if you'd like a recording of this session, you can just email us at help@getsetup.io. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed this past hour. I sure did. It was great talking with you all, and hope to see you again in another class soon.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay. Everybody,
Thank
take
you,
care.
Scott. Take care. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye now.